Hello, nerdy romantics. So let's get back to Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. Our show chat about the Queen Charlotte series on Netflix.
This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson.
There was one relationship that I really enjoyed watching, and it wasn't the friendship. It was Lady Agatha and the Dowager Princess Augusta. I loved it when those two came together
back and
just
forth.
back and forth.
Yes.
But I also like the scene when Lady Danbury broke down and started crying. And the other lady was like, "No, this is not our relationship.
This is not what we do.
We are adversaries." But the reason I enjoyed that adversary relationship,
so
I cannot give you
together.
Yeah, give you some. What was it? The plum brandy or whatever she was.
Yeah,
the pear brandy.
Some kind of break.
But I thought that relationship, how they were going back and forth, and that's where you saw where Lady Danbury got her medal, like from sparring with her, just duking it out with the Dowager Princess. But I really did like that scene. I mean, we see the back and forth of it, but that one scene when Lady Danbury just cried. You know, she had so much pressure on her to maintain the title of lady for her children and really for everybody in the Great Experiment, because she was the one who had to go through all that. And you realize when she started crying, the other lady was like, this is not our relationship. But she gave her advice.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say.
It wasn't she cried, yes, and now I win. It's like, no, our relationship is going back and forth, and if you can't go back and forth, you have to bear up. I mean, I love that. I love that even though they were adversaries, she did not take pleasure in her breaking down for that. At least for one tea, she just broke down.
And I think it's because you see that even in the Dowager Queen's position, that she oftentimes herself is discounted by the men around her. That even though she at the time was the regent, that she still got second guessed by men as well. So I think when she saw another woman in fear of being disenfranchised, I think that she was like, oh no, even you aren't powerless yet. And I think that was that moment where even adversaries, like you said, recognize when you need to give your adversary a little bit of help so that they can stay on the same playing field with you. And I think that's what she did because she knew what that felt like for herself. And I think that beyond all the other things they were going through, she knew what that felt like. And I think we see that in a couple of different places in the stories where people step into someone else's shoes for just long enough to have that level of humanity. And I think that's what kept it from feeling farcical, manufactured, is that every now and again we would see people shift into a different understanding of someone else's situation for a minute. And I agree with you, Stacey. That was one of those powerful scenes. Also, the other one for me was when Lady Danbury really sees and hears Lord Danbury when he says, they'll never accept me, they'll never treat me like that. In that moment, she knows what that feels like. And she realizes in that moment that she can be of service to him. I think in every one of these situations, each one of those people has had that moment where they could feel what someone else was feeling for a moment. And I think that the humanity of all these characters, I think is what kept me engaged. And I think all of those scenarios kind of embody that, where it was more than just the surface in all of these relationships, that it wasn't just a one layer, one dimensional relationship, that all of them had context and all of them had depth. And I think that it's hard to see that across all of them, but all of us have highlighted different relationships that had that same level of depth, whether it was the body men or the butlers or the whatever you call Brimsley and Reynolds, all the way to these two adversaries, to the wives, to Lady Danbury and the queen and the young queen. I think in all of these, they weren't just one note relationships. and one-note characters. And I think maybe, Dana, that's what it feels like when we watch Bridgerton and we watch the young kids. They do seem much more one note. And I think that might be the distinction.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right. I agree.
But I wonder if even the young people didn't get the kind of wisdom that you recognize, even with Queen Charlotte, the wisdom that she got from Lady Danbury. And Lady Danbury shares that, and it helps her to even be a better queen and be a better wife and everything. I wonder if you're just not seeing that because they're not getting that full wisdom and direction that that we saw in Queen Charlotte.
Including like the direction, even what the Dowager Princess gave Queen Charlotte, talking about you have a young king in your belly, but my king is no longer safe and comfort. And how she talked about how basically telling her she was failing the king by letting him not face his people. That yes, that might where he feels safe, but that's not what he needs to get to keep his kingdom, to keep his crown. And how she said it, you could tell that yes, she cares about the kingdom and about their position in it, but it's because she knows that that's her son's birthright and he will lose it if he does not face it. And you're allowing him not to face it. And the person the actress, what is her name? She's played on Game of Thrones and all that. I love her and everything she pretty much plays.
I do too. She's feisty.
Yeah, she is. But she played that role very well too. I mean, even though you first see it and she's rubbing the skin on Queen Charlotte's place, like she kind of dog here, she still becomes a person that in some senses you can admire because of the things she talked about, how her life was not with her husband when after her husband passed, and she was basically, because she was the dowager prince. She's not even the dowager queen. She never became a queen because her husband died before. So she was always the dowager princess.
Yeah.
And
her name is Michelle Fairley.
But and she talked about the king who was the king at the time, her father-in-law, and how she and her son were treated under him. And just seeing how where she was powerless. I mean, and she talks about that. I really do. Gosh, Shonda really did it in this.
Yeah.
In this season, because it just so many different layers, and the characters are we're all so well rounded. And I do have to agree, like, and maybe because we're older than the Bridgerton season 1, season 2, where I don't know, I guess it is more one note, but I guess it's because it's more, those to me seem like it was more fluff. Good fluff, not saying that it wasn't great, but this is like, ooh, a hearty meal. You know, it was a lot more to, I guess, more to see. It was just more in-depth relationship than that first blooming of love, but just the whole season of love, of relationships, not just that beginning and that passion, but we saw that, but we saw from beginning to end, or from the birth to death of different relationships there.
Yep. And it's not really necessarily a plot device, but it's kind of like how Shonda tells stories over a season of things. Like she'll start out with, this is what's happening now, but we're kind of getting flashbacks of maybe what would happen, like how she tells it. And Peter Nowak kind of adopted it as well with How to Get Away with Murder. But with a Shonda series, you get that middle of the season where usually for most series, that middle of the season is usually that down point. That's usually when people are like, okay, are we going to stay with this or not? And even Hollywood is saying, are we going to keep this show or are we going to let it go? But that middle point with a Shonda show, that's usually the juicy episode. That's usually an episode where you find out where everything that's been going on, how that ended up happening. And I kind of get that same feeling a little bit here. I get that feeling like we've established our world, and maybe for better or for worse, we like certain people in it or whatever. We've already made our assumptions. But now we have this we interrupt your regularly televised program to actually show you how these people got to this point where you watching. And that's usually the meaty episode for like a Shonda show. And I feel like we get that here. We get so much richness. Jen mentioned layers, but Marcy also mentioned how each character has a moment of empathy for whoever they're playing against. And you get a moment of either empathy or forced appreciation. And when you put that together, the moment of empathy and appreciation, that's actually creating this other layer to this character. At first, I was like, Dowager Princess Augusta, she's doing that boss thing, but I don't know where she's actually coming from. I kind of felt like bristles. I was like, okay, this woman, I think she's feeling some kind of way that on one side, you got the House of Lords talking junk and want to oust your boy. And on the other side, you got this Queen Charlotte, and she's a little bit darker than what we thought she was going to be. And she's taking my son. And then you got the other side of we need Georgie to have an heir and you need to bring it with the kids. So I was kind of like, what's going on with her? But then when we have that moment where Lady Danbury breaks down and then we get this moment from Dowager Princess Augusta that gives her a layer that I did not see before because we were not shown that layer. We get that layer because she's trying to force Lady Danbury to see, I know it's tough, but I've been there. I get it. You got to muscle up because it is tough. Let me tell you about my story. And the way that Shonda does this in every relationship that we see is genius. I mean, there's there's no way you
I
can.
agree.
Oh, it's just pure genius. As a writer, I'm just like, go right here because it's very hard to do. But then she also has these great actors who can also convey that emotion that's needed to be conveyed at that moment with just a look. And with this amazing genius writing, that's why we feel like we got this smorgasbord going here. I think that's why we feel like, wow, this is some amazing stuff. Jen, your mic is open.
Yeah, what you were saying about the depth of these characters, but another way to think about the reason that we are so invested in them is how because the stakes are so high. So it's a little bit of a different way to think about it, right?
Yeah.
The in the previous two seasons, we're talking about, do people marry for love? Do they marry for position? Do they marry because this is the person you're told to marry and so forth? And here we have Charlotte, who is married because she is told to, and has a worst case scenario where she shows up in the morning and is married that night. Literally has no time to get to know him or to even be super comfortable. And what's at stake here for the Dowager Princess situation is literally her son and their life and their livelihood and the entire position of the monarchy and
Right.
what position that plays
Exactly.
in England going forward. And we see those discussions still happening when you have a monarch who is not considered very strong. Those conversations start happening again about whether we need a monarchy at all or not.
Yep.
And so we see that driving the princess early in the earlier times. And then later we see Queen Charlotte talking to her children about it and trying to impose on them how important it is because they don't see the importance. They have this comfort level the same way that the Bridgerton family has this comfort because everything seems fine and nothing is ever
Yeah.
going to change. So they don't feel driven to make this change. And all the stakes are so high for each person. For Lady Danbury, if she doesn't convince the Dowager Princess, who has to convince Parliament to have her son inherit, then there's an entire generation of folks that are going to lose out. On the one hand, she wants to be closer friends with the queen to try and secure that position, but also she sees her as a young woman who is placed in this position. We find out that Lady Danbury was promised at age 3 to this person, that she has never felt any love for and never felt any love from. So the stakes in all of these relationships, they're so high and there's such a high probability of tragedy. And everything just feels like it's on edge all of the time. It really keeps us on the edge of our seats.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It just seems like everything is just ratcheted up versus the other two seasons. You kind of feel a little bit of that in the second season, where she's trying to kind of secure a place for her sister so they can live well. You kind of feel a little bit of that, but it didn't come across like it's coming across here. The stakes are raised, and these people are matching the stakes. They recognize the importance, and they're not fooling around here. And when they do break down, there's somebody there that they're relating to or that sees them that has actually kind of supported them. Just like how Marcy was saying with each relationship, there's somebody there at that moment when they're having that moment of insecurity or their moment of whatever that is kind of holding them up. And so those stakes get met. But Cam, you had your mic open there for a second too when we were talking about the layers and the writing and all of that.
No, I think I was just agreeing where everybody was. But I know one thing that we really don't mention that's totally off subject, I think, especially for this one, is with the narration of Lady Whistledown. I know
Yeah.
you see that more in the first and second episodes of Bridgerton, but for this one, I know because Lady Whistledown is not really a part of this, the prequel part. She doesn't come until she becomes like this big figure talking about what's going on in the city. But still, I'm always touched with Shonda Rhimes when she uses the narration to kind of
Yeah.
keep things moving.
Yes.
And even though it wasn't a lot in this one, I think it was helpful to still hear it. And most of it, I think, was probably there because of the flash forwards where we were looking at where time was currently. So I always love the fact that when I hear Shonda Rhimes, I know she's gonna have narration most of the time. And I love that. That's great to hear. And it always keeps me going and wanting to hear more and more and see more and more. So I was still glad to hear Julie Andrews' voice, even at the beginning. It made me stay connected and want to see what was going to happen. So just a
Right.
little
She
tidbit.
said, yeah, she set those stakes at the beginning. And two, it also helps because Shonda, like I was saying before, with a lot of her shows, she'll do that flashback kind of thing. And you're right. Lady Whistledown is speaking, trying to orient us to the now parts where we might need help. So that makes the story feel natural, like we're just riding this wave. And it all just seems to work together. One thing I did want to go back and mention that Dana mentioned briefly is the clothes and the makeup. Not just the clothes and the makeup, but the hair. Amazing.
Wow.
Oh
Wow.
Lord.
Oh, the hair.
Come on, Queen Charlotte. And you know she had to wear like a harness or something to help hold some of that stuff up.
Right? Like,
it's crazy.
there is no way. I thought there was one time where she had this get up and it was like all braids in the front. It was standing up. And this is the older Queen Charlotte, the current Bridgerton one. And she had all these braids in the front, kind of making a halo or kind of like a cone shape. But in the back, it was feathers and flowers. And I thought a bird was going to fly out of that thing. It was amazing. But just the grandeur of it all makes you just go mouth open, just looking, because it's one thing to see, because there are a lot of period things with royalty on now, but this particular show is just like, I'm just looking at this in awe, and I'm like, yeah, these people really have unlimited budget here because it's just amazing what they're doing with it. And part two on that, we have now had enough instances, Hollywood, to show that yes, you can like people of different shades and they look amazing. So learn lighting, please, from Shonda, from Ava DuVernay, from somebody, please. Learn how to these people because they look amazing and they're all different shades here, all different colors, and they all look amazing. But that makeup is amazing. Loved all the clothes. But one thing that just stood out to me and I wanted to reach out and touch it was King George had on this brocade suit. It was after they were married. Queen Charlotte was eating alone after the puppy and everything. He actually came to Buckingham Palace, and ate with her that first meal. And he had on this brocade three-piece suit, and it was like a dark purple. I just wanted to reach out and touch it. That looked like the finest material. It was just shimmering. But the other thing too here that has been just a total positive all the way through, and I'm glad they continue to do it here, was the classic renditions of current pop hits, especially the Alicia Keys one where they first dance. If I Ain't Got You, love that rendition. All these little touches just add to, the greatness of what's going on here in this show.
I think that's a Shonda thing too. Definitely a Shonda thing because I've been a fan of hers forever, and I laugh when I hear different renditions of things like on her shows that she has now, like Grey's Anatomy, that seems to never end. But I like
Right.
that. I think that's
Exactly. Yeah, and she did that on Scandal a lot too. You're looking at Scandal and you're thinking, I want to hate these people, but then I also want to sing and dance. It's like, wait a minute, what? But yeah, I love all those little touches. Those are just amazing little touches. I don't think I got to everybody, but we did talk about a lot. For Pam, Marcy, is there one thing that stood out to you that maybe we haven't talked about yet that stayed with you?
I mean, we talked about a lot, and I think what stayed with me the most was that last scene and the poignancy of that last scene. So anything else that stayed with me? I think I've talked about all the things, or we have brought them up as a collective. It's just this is a much more deeper vibe than season 2 for sure. And I like that it was a departure. I like this version and this aesthetic, and I hope we see more of it. But for me, what will always stand out is you didn't go over the wall. No, George, I didn't go over the wall. That moment and the beauty of how it was shot, acted, the sentiment behind it will stick with me, I think, forever.
Pam, what about
Yes.
you? Is there something else that maybe we haven't talked about that really stuck out with you?
Oh, wait,
Well,
I have one more.
yeah,
And
go
Okay,
it's
yeah.
ahead.
it's a bit more of a funny one. I find myself in situations saying sorrows, sorrows, prayers
I was waiting for somebody to
because
say it.
that was to me it was a good place of comic relief the first time we see it in a heavy moment and then we see her repeat it again, but it's just the awkwardness of not knowing how to respond in a moment like that, and then to come up with that particular phrasing and have it be awkward but also fitting and also
Yeah.
funny. And so I
Yeah.
do sometimes find myself saying sorrows, sorrows, prayers when I have nothing better to say. So I think that also sticks out in my mind as a handy catchphrase.
That was a good one. I like
That
that one.
was.
I did laugh at when he was crying. I guess that wasn't, I mean, it was comedic relief. I think we already mentioned this when Lord Danbury and Lady Danbury were going to their new home. And when they get out and they look at it, and he said, "Is this really ours?" It was like he couldn't believe that
Oh
this was
yeah.
given to him.
Yeah.
And it was going back to what Lady Danbury fought for to get for him so that he would be valued and he would be accepted. And so seeing that house, and I just remember when she started to say something, he told her to hush. And
Right.
I
Yeah, she said,
mean,
I believe, and then he's like, hush, woman, go
yeah.
use this key to get in the house.
I thought that was an awesome moment. But then I was laughing because I was saying in my head, I said, I wonder what Lady Danbury is really saying. But she knew this man.
Right.
She had been with him all this time, and she knew this was totally him. But in the back of her mind, I could imagine she said, yeah, I did this not only for you, but for our family and for us to be great beyond that. I loved it when they looked up at that house. I thought it was a great moment. And just to hear him tell her to hush.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for me, everything has pretty much been said that kind of stuck with me. I think for me, though, too, is a lot of the little detail stuff sticks with me. As a writer, the little detail things stick with me because if you're writing in those little details, that makes your character jump off that page. It makes your character human if your character is not a human. It makes them more relatable. Like, because we all have little touches and little things that we do and little habits that we have that are unique to us, but it's also what relates us to one another, like the hush woman thing. That stuck with me because that's a little thing, but it tells us a lot about the dynamic between them. It tells us a lot about Lord Danbury, who he is, because he's saying that in a comfortable kind of way. So it's not like that's the first time he's ever said that, or that he is concerned about blowback from Lady Danbury. It tells us a lot about their dynamic. It tells us a lot about who he is. One thing that I thought was interesting was that Violet Ledger at the time, her mom was just straight up racist. But her dad, of course, it was funny of that kind of dynamic between between Violet's mom and Violet's dad. You know, her dad was not racist and he was also a little bit kind of sad, you know, I think.
What?
Yeah.
Well,
Stacey, what were you gonna say?
well, I say they do that kind of stuff all the time, especially when somebody's gonna have an affair, and we still want them to be sympathetic. We got to make the
Well,
spouse
yeah.
a
Well,
little
of
bit,
course.
you
Of
know.
course. But
It was awful, but I mean,
yeah,
just
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
But I think that is what was so powerful about the moment where she sees them as a family in the garden and he's laughing with the
Yes.
wife. And I think that's
Yes.
the moment where even she knows that it can't be anything more than what it was.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that was a brilliant moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
I had
Yeah.
one more thing I wanted to
Yeah.
mention real quick as you were talking. The other image that I thought was interesting was you remember when Brimsley and Queen Charlotte are walking and picking oranges and how Brimsley was trying to get the folks to come and grab the orange off the tree, and she was like, from now on I want to pick my own orange, and not realizing she wanted to keep her independence in something almost, but not realizing it was affecting others, because when she said she didn't want anybody to pick her oranges anymore, then that particular role was gone. So those people
Yes.
didn't have jobs anymore to
Yeah.
even do something like that. And
Right. And
so
it
the effect
wasn't
she had.
even, yeah, it wasn't even that one person, right? She was like,
Exactly.
where are the men in the orangery? Like
Exactly.
she basically fired a whole bunch of people by saying, but you know, it was that moment, it was kind of compounding, but that one drove it home. I agree with you on that. But it kind of had a compounding effect with the Queen Charlotte King George dynamic that they do one little thing and it could affect so many other people. At first, when you see them and you're looking at it, and it's like they have all these tables of food and everything is gold and all of this kind of stuff, and there's all this grandeur and everything going on around. And she's always got to wear jewelry. So at one point, you're thinking, gosh, these people are so rich, it's disgusting, you know. And even though we don't see them because we're looking at mostly the upper crust of society in this show, which there are people out there that don't have anything in this society, but at the same time they have all of this stuff. But then if they want to do something on their own, like I want to pick my own orange, she ends up firing a bunch of those people. I mean, Pam, you're right. That really kind of drove that home, that whole dynamic between they have all this stuff and they have all these servants, but at the same, they're responsible for so much. And one little thing that they say or do could really impact everything else. And in season 2, when they had that whole, she said she was going to get married, how do we get out of this? It felt like a farce. But here, when she says, I want to pick my own orange, and she doesn't want to have a discussion about it, and the next day, all those people in the orangery are fired, that's what makes an impact. Versus season 2, where they say, one little thing and then they're running around in circles trying to figure out how to undo it. That's the whole difference that we feel. Season 2 for me kind of feels like a farce, where they're raising the stakes, compared to this season, where it really feels like they really trying to raise the stakes. I mean, I don't know if anybody else feels that same way, but
No, I agree with you.
yeah, yeah. So the little detail things like that for me that make these people even more real and more relatable. She's looking at the dog, talking about it's a deformed bunny. And then the whole thing about George, she says, that you were at a brothel. And he says, do you even know what happens in a brothel? And she says, yes, I know what happens in a brothel, almost. This is so funny. The dynamic between them is funny. But all these little things, that's what resonates with me. A lot of that is me being a writer, wanting to kind of figure out how do we do this on page. But also, it's just me just loving this show and just sitting there binge watching it and just, you know, like in awe.
And I do admit, I've already started watching it again.
And I liked how he called it a deformed bunny, but then you see in the later years, all her ladies are having a little Pomeranian in their arms.
Yes, they
Right.
sure do. Yep.
Right.
True.
Once she learns to love it, everybody loves it.
Right. It's like everybody loves it. And she takes it with her all the time, when she's older. But yeah, it's so funny. It's hilarious. I love it.
And I
But
think it's one of those poignant moments where you see it the first time and you see her and her reaction, but then you look at it differently, and perhaps she does too, once you see the intent behind it from George. Like, that's when you look at it
right.
and you're like,
The intent.
oh, like it takes on a different meaning. And I think that
Yes.
was when that episode started. I was like, I don't know if I want to see this again because I already know what happened. But to see, I, I think the way that that was done to show her perspective and then bounce to his and start in the same place, I think that was, and
Yes.
show you the other side of those same situations. I mean, again, it was brilliant.
Yeah, that episode 5, I think that was either 4 or 5 where
Yep,
they
that was
do
episode
where
5.
it goes back. Yeah. And again, it's another kind of Shonda device where she's kind of going back and giving you some more parts of this story so you can kind of put things together. She's even doing that within this season, and it's brilliant. It gives me another layer to George. Even though we liked him at that layer and we knew he's even more cinnamon rolly good at that point. So we've talked about so much stuff here, y'all, and it's been so great talking to y'all, but I can't leave without doing a rating and giving everybody a chance to talk about what they would rate it and why. And here we do our Goodreads ratings, and it's 1 star to 5 star. Even though this is not a book, we are a reader show and we do talk about books. So we are using the Goodreads rating, which 1 star means we didn't like it, 2 stars means it was okay, 3 stars we did like it, 4 stars we really liked it, and 5 stars it was amazing. So I'm going to start with Dana. What's your rating?
So I am going to give it 4.75, and it's losing the 0.25 because I didn't want to DM. Now, I mean, honestly, we talked about it numerous amount of times. Shonda did fantastic here, and the actors and actresses and everything. I mean, I think it was a very solid 6 episodes, and it was fantastic. The fact that we've spent this much time talking about it, and there's still tons of things that I know I want to say, but I don't want people to end up with a 10-hour podcast to listen to. Just, I think, speaks volumes to how much we liked it and how good it was.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Jen, what about you? What is your star rating for this one?
I'm also going to go with 4.75. And as much as I loved everything about it, from the characters to the depth that they had, their commitment to duty, and trying to find some sort of balance between the duty they had to perform and the person, like try to be themselves as a person. There was one or two of the episodes where we started getting King George's perspective on everything that had happened. And they kind of go back and they revisit some of the scenes and we see it from King George's POV. And there were times when I felt like there was a little too much because they just were rehashing the same thing that we saw from Queen Charlotte's perspective without adding more. And the parts of it where they added, we like really got deep into like what George was experiencing and what George was going through and where his concerns and fears and worries were. That part was really great, but it was a little bit that I felt like we went just a little bit too long, and I sort of sat there and was like, you're losing me a little bit here. And then of course it picked right back up with the next episode. So almost perfect.
All right. Stacy, what about you? What's your star rating here?
I'm gonna say mine's a 5. I just really, I mean, I enjoyed the whole story and really the multiple storylines and the just perspective of young love, older love, loss, and just I think there was like something for everyone in that series so far in this particular season. It was really great. I didn't say I was off the Bridgerton train, but I admit season 2, I was like, okay, we're gonna see how you do with this next calling thing. But this made me like, okay, Shonda, I'm back on board. Come on. So right now, I'm gonna have to say it's a 5 for me for this one.
Okay. Marcy, what about you? What's your star rating?
I'm going with Stacy. I agree. To me, this was a 5 all the way around. I'm with Pam. I would watch it again. I may, on a rainy day this weekend, do exactly that. So, yes, I'm giving her a 5 all the way around for character development, for music, for scenery, for decoration, for actor choices, for some great moments, for some depth, for some. I'm giving her 5 all the way around. Like I said, I don't binge it very often because I don't get all the way to the end at one sitting. I have to come back and do the rest, but I could not stop watching those. So I give her all 5 of the stars because they earned them.
Yeah. Pam, what about you? What's your star rating for this one?
I would go with a 5 as well. I'm so glad that I feel like I was forced to watch it. I'm so glad I did because, like I said in the beginning, I really began to like who Queen Charlotte was. I loved Lady Danbury. I love all the characters and all the storylines that was in the midst of just those 6 episodes. And I can't wait to see what else Shondaland has to come up with. So, yep, a 5. I loved it.
All right, great. I'm going to give it a 5 as well for all the reasons said. I thought it was great. And in preparation for this podcast, I did watch a few episodes again already. And the fact that I didn't feel like I was forced to watch them just so I could remember what was going on, that I really enjoyed them and kind of had to tear myself away so I could talk to y'all on this podcast. Actually, kind of sealed the deal that this was a 5-star kind of show. It's really rich, it's really layered. It's almost a tutorial in how to write a great story for writers out there and for people who just like seeing really good story on TV. It's just handy. I mean, it's amazing. Which is 5 stars. That is what it is. It's amazing. So I just want to say, ladies, thank y'all so much. Thank you for the ones who felt like it was homework at first, for sticking with it and coming on and talking with me about Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, on the podcast. Thanks for being here, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thanks. It was
you.
fun.
Thank you so much. This was great.
While that's the end of our discussion, it's not the end of the story, so to speak. We now have premium episodes, which you can get in your feed, wherever you listen to podcasts, or in your inbox if you listen on nerdyromanticspodcast.com. And if you want to know more about the Nerdy Romantics world, sign up for our newsletter. Visit my website at nerdyromanticspodcast.com for more details. Now that's the end of the story. Until next time, thank you for listening.